Hey, we've got an article up on themeparkinsider.com today called Here are the 5 Most Cringe Attractions at Disney. All of this was inspired by an article in The Guardian yesterday bagging on the old Ellen's Energy Adventure attraction in Epcot, calling it a pro-fossil fuel ride, which it 100% was. It was sponsored by Exxon when it was developed. It was a replacement for Exxon's original Universe of Energy attraction. So, it was a little bit of a transitional attraction and that began to address some of the problems with fossil fuel energy that the initial version, just kind of brushed past. The big reason that attraction held on for as long as it did was the dinosaurs. You could sit down in the air conditioning and look at a big plussed up version of Disneyland's Primeval World diorama, and people love big animatronic dinosaurs. What's not to love about that? A lot of people miss it. Would love to see that scene back in some context. But the fact is that, it was a lame script. Disney ditched it. They're bringing in that Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster, which I think will probably be a big hit. We'll know more about that in a couple of months when it debuts. But anyway, the whole thing inspired me to think of, there are several more attractions at Disney that remain cringe and probably need to be fixed up or to go extinct like Ellen's Energy Adventure is. First up, I will give Disney credit for fixing up some of the problematic attractions that they've had in recent years. The earlier example of this is Pirates of the Caribbean, where they got rid of what's frankly human trafficking with the auction scene. And spare me complaints about there was just an accurate depiction of it. Nothing was an accurate depiction of pirates and Pirates of the Caribbean. This whole thing was cartoony. It was jokey the entire time. You can play these as caricatures if you want, but it should not make people feel uncomfortable. And if you didn't feel uncomfortable in Pirates of the Caribbean, you were probably a guy. The attraction is just as strong today as it's ever been, I think, and they found a way of doing it without, being offensive to people. So good for them. Jungle Cruise, too. They fixed that ride. That was a ride that made a lot of people uncomfortable. And if you're not uncomfortable, you're probably white. It's great. I like what they did with it. Still a great ride, still fun, still, depends on your skipper, obviously, but still a good time for a lot of people. And not offensive. So good on them for fixing that. Some ones they still need to get to. Let's talk about Splash Mountain. Can't separate it from Song of the South, which is a movie that Disney has rightfully buried because it's just too connected with minstrelsy and a lot of racist entertainment from the 19th century. The Zippity-Doo-Dah song is derivative of a really offensive minstrel song, and Disney has been backpedaling on that. Unfortunately, they don't really seem to be publicly pedaling at all on the transition to the Princess and the Frog theme, which they announced a couple of years ago. Is it still under development at WDI? When are we going to get a time frame on when this is actually going to get installed? We haven't heard anything from them, and I think, frankly, it's time to hold Disney's feet to the fire and say you need to get moving with some changes on Splash Mountain. They just refurbed it. Great. I mean, it looks good from, a theatrical arts perspective, but there's still a connection to an ugliness that's just not really appropriate for Disney to be maintaining anymore. Spaceship Earth, there are still script problems with that. In fact, every time that they've tried to adapt the script for Spaceship Earth, I think they've made it a little bit worse. The focus is very much on Western corporate development of communication, which is understandable since AT&T basically paid for that attraction initially. If you really want to tell the story of communication around the world or just, of this Spaceship Earth, you need to revise that. And they've promised that they would do it, but that got shelved because of the pandemic, along with so many other projects. Again, I think it's time for Disney, particularly as it's taking a lot of heat for people for their lack of a stance defending their LGBTQIA, cast members in Florida, for them to step up and, do the right thing with some of these cultural issues. But a couple of more that we haven't talked about that Disney hasn't made any publicly announced plans to fix that remain cringe that they need to go after. Let's talk about Peter Pan. I mean, take a look at this promotional image from Disney World's website. Ouch. If you think that's in any way an acceptable depiction of indigenous people in this day and age, you're probably white. No, I mean that's got to go. I mean, and the thing about Disney even disclaims Peter Pan on Disney Plus that this is not appropriate depictions of people. That they've decided to keep it there and try and provide some context for it rather than just burying it. But these depictions are as bad, if not worse, as what's in Song of the South, and they did bury that. I don't want to get into trying to draw any distinction between better or worse when stuff is just bad. It's like the line about drowning. It doesn't matter whether you're 6 inches over your head or 60 feet. You're still not doing well. Once you're past a certain point of just bad, and I think both Peter Pan and Song of the South are for these depictions, doesn't matter whether one's worse or better than the other. They're both bad, and this is not something that Disney needs to be peddling for profit anymore. But the thing about Peter Pan's flight is that those depictions are not what people love about that attraction. People love the Starfield. People love flying, the flying over London. People like the battle with Captain Hook. You can keep all of that stuff. Just take out the 2 or 3 little dioramas with the indigenous depictions, and frankly, you put some Starfield over that. Nobody's going to notice it. This can still be a welcoming attraction for a lot of people. Its main problem remains low throughput. So the lines are always going to be crazy about that. But Disney could fix that. And then one more, Tiki Room. I love that space. It is one of my favorite animatronic shows. It's this wonderfully kinetic space with everything happening with the birds and the flowers and the everything that's happening on the walls in there, and just absolutely wonderful. Trouble is that the ethnic caricatures of the 4 host birds, that was cringeworthy 30 years ago. It's no longer acceptable today. And that's before we even get into the whole issue of just kind of reducing Pacific Islander culture and narrative and myth to kitsch entertainment, which has been a problem in American culture since about the 1950s. I think the Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland, Tropical Serenade at Walt Disney World, can be salvaged. I mean, it's just going to take finding some new narrative framing, some new character development that's actually respectful of Pacific Islander culture. It's a cultural mishmash with all that you've got with the different species of birds and flowers and everything in there, but that's fine. I mean, it's fine to have a representation of multiculturalism, and as the first audio animatronic attraction, I think, Tiki Room can provide that, but you've got to respect the cultures that are being depicted in there, and Disney needs to do better by Pacific Islander culture. They've been trying to do that with some of their, filmed entertainment recently. I think they certainly could do it with Enchanted Tiki Room. They just have to have the green light and the budget in order to do it. Final thing that I've got there is not so much cultural. There's a little bit of a cultural issue with it, but it's more just a technical thing, and it's Soaring Around the World, home of the Leaning Tower of Eiffel. Soaring over California spawned an entire industry of flying theater attractions, and they're wonderful. They're normally themed to a specific place, like a state or a community or a region, and like a little visual travelogue. The inherent problem with these flying theater attractions is that your camera is trapped up in the air, which means that you can't get close for personal interactions. You can't get a lot of really detail. It's literally an overview. Now, that's kind of cool if you're a tourist and you just want that literal overview of the best sites in an area. It's cool if you're local and you get that bird's eye view of your community that you don't normally get because you're down there with all that detail. But the trouble is, if all you're offering is visual imagery, that needs to be great, authentic, compelling visual imagery. When you're trying to goose it up with some CG, computer-generated imagery, or you're just using computer-generated imagery for entire scenes, that gets cringe pretty fast. And as a Californian, Disneyland's my home park. I would love to see Soaring Over California, which is now playing for that, the California Food and Wine Festival. I wish they would just make that permanent in California. I wish in China, it plays in Shanghai, they would do a Soaring Over China, which they could kind of repurpose that as the new 360 film in Epcot, which they've been promising us for years and never did deliver. Certainly, it would be kind of interesting how you would shoot something that would be both for a Soaring over China and a 360, but that's doable. Japan, I don't know what you do with the SEA, Societies of Explorers and Adventurers, kind of overlay that they've given to that, but I'm sure they could come up with something. Florida, I don't really know what you do with that, because Soaring over Florida sounds like the most boring thing imaginable. But maybe they could do something with SEA that they do in Tokyo or Florida, or maybe just bring back Soaring over California everywhere. It's a great show. People loved it in Florida. So anyway, that's up on themeparkinsider.com right now. I think it's important as we cover the theme park industry that this isn't just about travel planning. This isn't just about hype for the next big thing. I think it's important that we take a critical view of what's currently happening in the parks within the context of what's happening in society, and deciding whether or not the artistry of what theme park companies are putting forward really holds up. And this is artistry. I mean, these are creative works. This is art. This is an artistic medium. This isn't just mass entertainment. You can make a statement with this sort of thing, and your statement can be positive or your statement can be negative. I think right now, Disney's making some kind of negative statements with some of their attractions, but Disney has shown the willingness in the past to make changes, to do right by their audience, and to turn negative statements into positive ones. I've welcomed what I've seen on attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean and Jungle Cruise, and look forward to their next steps. It's just I wish they would take some of these steps a little bit faster, and given the current kind of political environment within the Walt Disney Company, maybe there might be a willingness to accelerate things in order to make a good faith statements to traditionally marginalized communities. That would be a wonderful step forward at this point. So we'll have to wait and see what Disney and Disney management chooses to do. Thanks for following along here on Theme Park Insider, and as always, thanks for watching.